Hey guys, welcome to the first ever episode of Wilderness Survival Tips, the internet's video guide for archaeologists by archaeologists. So, today we're going to talk about something a little bit private, something very lady centric. You might even be kind of embarrassed by today's topic. Periods. They happen, they're totally normal. You need to learn how to deal with them if you're a lady who's working in the bush. So, the good news is that having your period as a female archaeologist is completely normal and totally manageable. We're going to talk about some myths first about periods that you might have heard. Then we're going to talk about some menstruation methods. And finally, we're just going to finish up the video with some general tips about how to manage your monthly annoyance. Archaeology is still a bit of an old boys club. And even though we are getting a lot closer to an even gender ratio, chances are you're going to have to work with or under some pretty serious dude men. And as dude men, they're kind of clueless about the female anatomy. They might even warn you about some period myths, if they even talk about your period at all. Myth number 1. You can't do physical activity while on your monthly cycle. Okay, yes. Some women may feel the effects of their period more than others. And sure, certainly some women feel tired while they're bleeding. But that doesn't mean just because you're on your period, you have to call in sick for field work. It's actually kind of good for you. It works out your abdominal muscles, which makes them feel more relaxed, and it releases endorphins, which actually makes you feel better. So no, don't let anyone bully you into calling in sick just because you're on your period. It's not like you turn into some gelatinous, goopy mess of a woman just because your uterus is bleeding. Myth number 2. Bears can smell it, and they'll attack you. This one's just totally and utterly ridiculous. They use this same myth for sharks, and its validity has never been proven. I mean, it's not like when you're on your period, you're just bleeding everywhere uncontrollably and like rolling around in it and rubbing it on stuff. And if you are, that's weird and we need to have a talk about hygiene. Even if you were doing that, it's not like the second bears smell blood. They just turn into homicidal maniacs. It's not like they're going to zero in on your crotch and hit attack mode. Because if that was true, there'd be a lot more female campers going around crotchless. Also, don't let them tell you that if you sit on a snowmobile, an ATV, or a quad, that later that night the bears are going to eat the seat. Because again, it's not like you're bleeding all over the seat and just leaving it there as a present for the bear. They're not going to eat the seat. It's going to be fine. Let's move on and talk about methods of containment. We have 4 to talk about. The first method, number 1, is skipping. You have to decide if you even want to have your period during field work. If you're just going out for a short-term project or you're on something like a field school and it's only going to be 5 weeks, it might be in your best interest to just skip that period entirely. And as a disclaimer, I have to tell you that I'm not a doctor and that I can't tell you whether or not it's a good idea or if it's healthy. But I can tell you that from personal experience, after talking to my doctor, during my field school and sometimes when I'm on projects, I skip my period. And it's never been a problem for me. If you are like me and a professional archaeologist and you're going to be in the field every day, I wouldn't recommend the skipping method. Personally, I just think that having your period is a healthy and normal part of having female genitalia. And I think that is just kind of a good thing to do. But if it's something that you think you're interested in, or if it sounds like the right kind of method for you, all I would say is talk to your doctor or gynecologist and find out what they think about skipping your period and what your options are. Option number 2, in terms of period methods, are pads, which are kind of like the tried and true method that most people learn to use when they first have their period. They're not necessarily a bad method of period containment to have in the field. They have their pros, but they definitely have their cons. Pads are really good for those days when you have a really heavy flow and you don't want to be ducking into the bush every 2 seconds to change your tampon. They're also good in the sense that you don't actually have to physically insert anything during the day. Even though I'd suggest washing your hands before changing them, it's not so much of a bacterial hazard, for example. On the other hand, there's almost nothing worse than riding in a boat or sitting on a skidoo with a big bulky pad between your legs. Another thing you have to think about is cleanup. You have to pack in what you pack out when you're in the bush. So Anything you use during the day, you have to bring back out with you. When you're packing out pads, they often require a little bit extra preparation than other methods might. You have to bring in more toilet paper to wrap them up, and they take up more space in your backpack or cruiser vest on the way out. Method number 3 is tampons, which I actually really like to use in the field because they're lightweight, they're clean, and they're discreet if you're worried about your male coworkers being total douche dicks in the field about you having your period, or your female coworkers. They're also more comfortable on ATVs and quads and things like that because they're not quite as bulky in between your legs. They're also really good in terms of packing in and packing out because, like I said before, they're lightweight, but also they have a little bit less of a mess when you're packing out. The applicators themselves are kind of designed to slip back into the package they came out of, which means you don't have to worry about wrapping that up in toilet paper. And then the tampons themselves are just smaller than pads. The only really big downside is that you have to make sure that your hands and area are really clean when you're going to go to reinsert a new one, because ARC sites are generally not very clean and you don't know what kind of stuff is all around there. You don't want God knows what all up in your hoo-ha, for example. So you have to be a little bit careful when you're reinserting tampons. Method number 4 is the Diva cup or other reusable menstrual options like sea sponges. I don't have a Diva cup and I've never used one, but I've heard really good things about them. They're really good for fieldwork in foreign countries or fieldwork where you're doing a lot of traveling because you don't have to worry about getting refills or new supplies because it's totally reusable and it's also eco-friendly. It's really annoying when you're in a foreign country, especially if you don't speak the language, trying to go buy feminine hygiene products because you can't read the box or they don't have your favorite brand. The Diva cup, you eliminate all of those problems. It's a cup that you insert into your lady vaginal area, and when it gets filled, usually at the end of the day, you rinse it out, clean it, and then you can pop it back in. There's a pretty big downside to the Diva cup, in my opinion. If you're a lady with a really heavy flow, it might not be the best option for you. And if you're in the bush in the middle of nowhere, where are you going to wash out your Diva cup? In like the river or something? One last thing to think about is in terms of packing in and packing out. The Diva cup is really easy to pack in and extra easy to pack out because it's literally attached to your vagina. You're not going to forget it. It's not going anywhere. You don't need to package it up clean. It's literally attached to you. 1 point, ding ding, for the Diva cup. Let's just talk about some, general tips to help you manage your period while you're working out in the middle of nowhere on an archaeology site. Let's talk about disposal. You have to pack out everything that you pack in. You can't bury things, you can't burn things. So what I do when I'm out in the field is I bring toilet paper with me, like a bundle of toilet paper, and I'll bring some moist towelettes type things. And I use the toilet paper, obviously, to help clean up in between changing applications. And I also use it to wrap up used pads or tampons. I use the moist towelettes to help clean up while I'm reinserting. And I also use them to clean my hands. And I also use hand sanitizer. I would suggest having a Ziploc bag or another kind of watertight receptacle to put used products into. Throw them all in there throughout the course of the day. Zip it up when you take it home. Just take the whole thing and just throw it out. You also want something watertight to pack your supplies in because, like, real talk for a second here, it rains a lot in the bush and you might accidentally sink a quad in a river and lose everything. Do you really want to be stuck out in the middle of nowhere with a package of wet pads? Ugh, I can't think of something more uncomfortable sounding than wet pads. Drinking lots of water and eating lots of healthy food will help your period just go by more smoothly. A lot of women get, headaches and cramps and dehydration during their period, and if they just drink a little bit more water, it might kind of alleviate some of those symptoms. And especially when you're doing the kind of strenuous work that we as archaeologists do, drinking a lot of water is just insanely important, and you might forget to do it during the day. I also like to pack a fun treat in my lunch during my period, something that I wouldn't usually get to eat, like chocolate or like cheese nips or something, because when you're having a shitty day because you're on your period, it's really exciting when lunch comes because, like, oh yeah, I have that, you know, chocolate pudding in my lunch. I'm really excited to eat it. Period surprise. Best lunch ever. You have to remember that your body is kind of in the process of, like, totally tearing down and destroying this baby nursery that it spent an entire month building, and it's not happy about it. So your body is not going to make this easy for you. And you're just going to have to learn to listen to it and to treat it like the machine that it is. And give it proper breaks. It might be, you know, super awkward to talk to your supervisor when you're having your period, but it's kind of important to let them know what's going on. They're responsible for your emotional and physical health, and if you don't let them in on what's actually happening to you, they can't properly respond to a situation where you might need help. When you're on your period, you're more susceptible to things like fainting or just intense pain. You kind of need to tell your supervisor about it. If you have a male supervisor, it can be just really, really awkward, and I understand that. And it's nice when you have a supervisor you feel comfortable with, especially if they're female and they understand where you're going. But if you're not going to at least tell your supervisor, you should let someone on the crew who you feel comfortable with and that you have a close relationship with about your period, because someone should know what's going on in your life, and someone should be able to respond appropriately if you get hurt or there's some kind of danger. And my last tip is kind of a tip on how to be an awesome person. Always have extra supplies on hand, even if you're not on your period. Because chances are, if you work in a crew of ladies, someone sometime is going to get their period, and it's going to be a surprise period. And if you're out in the middle of nowhere and you've been dropped off by a helicopter and it's not coming back for another 6 hours, you start to get a little crazy. You're like, oh my god, what am I going to do? Should I gather up some of that dry grass and stuff it down my pants? You could be, you know, a field hero. Also, tampons make really good fire starters, so if you get lost in the woods somewhere, you can use one to start a fire. They're in a waterproof package, and also the cotton burns really well. And on the other hand, pads are really good for abdominal or spurting arterial bleeds because they're super absorbent. Helpful tips. So I hope you found this video informative, and I hope the tips were helpful. For the guys out there, this video, if you managed to watch all of it, I don't know why you would, because you don't bleed once a month. But if you're still here and you're still watching, I have a tip for you. A lot of women, if they spend enough time together, will sync up to one woman's period, and so you may be in the field with a bunch of cranky, tired women all at once. I'm sorry, it sucks, but at least you're not bleeding. If that happens, and you know it's happening, maybe be a field hero and bring some chocolate in your pack. We'll love you for it, and we'll appreciate that you're trying to make our day better. If you like videos like this, hopefully we'll be having more coming out soon. I'd like to know about how you deal with your period, so you can either reblog the video on Tumblr, or I think I'm putting this on YouTube, so you can leave a comment. Let me know. I want to know how you guys deal with your periods. I want to know what tips I missed and maybe can make it easier for me to have my period in the field. I'm one half of Rural Archaeologist. Have a fantastic evening.